Black magic and sorcery go against everything we stand for at Baylor, but it might just be what the Bears need to end this hex in Morgantown, West Virginia. Let's get locked on Baylor.
You are Locked On Baylor, your daily podcast on the Baylor Bears, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello there, Bears fans. Welcome to another episode of Locked On Baylor, brought to you by FanDuel and part of the Locked On Podcast Network, where it is your team every day. I'm your host, Cam Stewart of ESPN Central Texas and the Cam Show on YouTube. Appreciate you guys making it your first listen today and every day. We are one day out from the Bears heading to Morgantown, West Virginia to take on the upstart Mountaineers, both teams at 5-4. This is going to be a ton of fun, but how does Baylor end that curse that's over them when it comes to playing in Motown? We'll go over that. We'll take a look back at some games earlier this season that we would really love a replay for Baylor now that they're really hot, and looking at basketball a little bit. The atmosphere around these games, Baylor's getting very close to being a true blue blood when it comes to the atmosphere and the team that they've got, what they need to fix. That's coming up, and so much more on this episode of Locked On Baylor. Let's get it going with Bears versus West Virginia tomorrow, 3 o'clock, right? 3 o'clock. Sure. Central Time in Milam-Pusker Stadium in beautiful Morgantown, West Virginia, a place the Baylor Bears have never won. Have you heard that one before? Have I said it enough this week? Yeah, the Bears are 0-6 in Morgantown all time. And it's a freaky one. It's not that much different from what we were talking about with TCU a few weeks back, right? I went on that whole rant of, you've had times where both teams were good, both teams were bad, one was good, one was bad, and you still didn't come away with the win. Yeah. It's that same way with Morgantown, right? I mean, literally the first time you went up there, you scored 63 points and lost. How often does that happen? 63 points on the road and you lose. The next time you go there, you're coming off the biggest regular season win in your history. It might be the greatest Baylor team ever assembled. They lose to West Virginia in 2014. 2016, they lost there too. I don't really remember it. I probably should. 2018, they got absolutely blown out there. 2020, second game of the Dave Aranda era. You're coming off a big-time win against Kansas. That West Virginia team's got no talent. You have a great drive to lead it into overtime at 14-all, but really, it looked like a brain-dead offense all day long. You lose that game in overtime. Okay, 2022, a year that you were picked to win the conference. You're already a weird 3-2 going into that game, but West Virginia's terrible. Terrible. They just lost to Kansas a few weeks ago. They lost by 14 in overtime. Who does that? They wanted to fire their coach so bad. And everything was going wrong, man. The bounces were going wrong, and all of a sudden Baylor leaves Morgantown after a 43-40 loss, being 3-3, and the rest of that season is never the same. Weird stuff happens there, man. Weird stuff. 2016, West Virginia had a good team. They were really challenging OU for that conference championship. I do remember that. It's a bizarre trip up there all the time, and always it comes out with a Baylor loss. So how do you reverse that? How do you get rid of that bad juju and go up there and get a much-needed win to get to bowl eligibility? Well, it starts with limiting the explosive plays. This is a Baylor secondary that has not been good the last few weeks. Dave Aranda talked about going into that bye week, how much they need to improve it. Well, here we go. You had 2 weeks at it, a week and a half. You give the guys a couple of days off to prepare for this West Virginia offense, whether it is Marchiol or Garrett Greene. They thrived off explosive plays last year. They haven't had as many this year. If you can keep them in front of you, that's going to help because you haven't forced turnovers. That's the thing that kind of bugs me about this Baylor defense. You can afford to give up points and give up yards if you're taking the ball away. But Baylor hadn't done that. And they've been living off the fact the last 3 weeks that they have a really good offense and that it's firing on all cylinders. This West Virginia defense is going to be a test for Baylor. They don't have a great secondary either, but they're great against the run. They're like third in the conference in rush yards against. So it's not going to be 8 yards in a cloud of dust the way it was the last couple of weeks. Okay? It's going to be like 2 yards in a cloud of dust. And you're going to have 2nd and 8s, 3rd and 9s. You're going to have that against this defense. You're not going to just be living off 3rd and 1, 3rd and 2. And obviously, I trust Sawyer Robertson, and I know you do too. But I'll take you back to that losing streak where he had to throw it 45, 50 times a game. It was not conducive to them pulling out wins at the end of games. Your arm gets tired. You get tired. So it's not going to be as easy as it has been the last couple of weeks to get what you want offensively. Then again, I do trust this team and the way that their chemistry has developed with Sawyer Robertson and his weapons. The one thing that both these teams are really quite good at is the net field position. Specifically Baylor. Baylor's top 10 in this. And that's where Baylor can really exploit West Virginia, is that great punt return game that they have, led by Josh Cameron, and leading to opportunities where you're playing with short fields and you can take the top off a little bit. You don't need to move the chains 3 times before you're taking shots down the field. You maybe move the chains once and you're taking a shot, because that's where it's going to be advantage Baylor. If you're going to have to drive 80, 90 yards, you're going to have to mix in some runs in there. And not that Baylor can't do that, but as I just mentioned, it's going to be a lot tougher to do against West Virginia than it was against TCU, than it was against Oklahoma State, than it was against Texas Tech. So if you're starting midfield, God forbid, plus territory, you move the chains once and all of a sudden you're like, Sawyer, sling this thing, man. Expose the secondary. You can get it there. That's where it could be advantage Baylor. Because both these teams are really good against the run. Baylor is, as much as I tout West Virginia being good against the run, Baylor has been too. It's been that secondary that's killed them. I said it yesterday with Paul, Mountaineer Paul, on that crossover. If you haven't checked that out, it's on the channel from yesterday's show. But I fully expect both these teams to be in the 30s. And really, no matter who's playing quarterback for West Virginia, which bothers me that there's no real advantage, I think, for Baylor with whomever goes out there, whether it is Markiel or Garrett Greene. But I think both these guys can put up numbers against this Baylor secondary, because they've both put up numbers this season, and Markiel's undefeated as a starter. So the kid's no slouch. I know he's still the backup, but he's no slouch. And it might be a game of field position for Baylor to come away with this one and finally end that hex. And you have had some exciting wins this year, albeit, you're not marching towards a college football playoff spot, but you won in Lubbock for the second time in a row. You ended a 5-year skid against TCU in really dramatic fashion. And now you can get a pretty nice milestone victory in there too. The first win against West Virginia, or at West Virginia, I should say. The first win at West Virginia. Because as I just laid out, you've had some good teams go up there and not pull it out. And if they win that game against West Virginia in 2022, even though they won the next couple after that, that could have changed a lot of things confidence-wise for that team. And maybe they don't go on a 4-game losing streak to end it. And most obviously, if you get that win in 2014, there's no debate. There's no Bob Bowlesby. There's controversy. There's no Big 12 little brother syndrome. You are in the college football playoff. Without question. Unequivocally, your own Big 12 championship and 12-0 heading to the college football playoff. That one still looms large for me. And that was not a bad West Virginia team by any means, by the way. It's not Geno Smith, and it's not Will Grier. It's Clint Trickett, if I remember correctly, that knocks off the Bears. But that was a pretty solid West Virginia team. If you win that game on the road, you're in the playoff. So it's those ghosts that loom over that you need to get rid of in this game tomorrow. And if you can keep West Virginia behind the sticks and get some good field position. Those might be the small details that it takes for Baylor to finally win at West Virginia. Let's look back at some games that Baylor might want a do-over for, as they are now hot on a 3-game winning streak heading up to Morgantown. That's coming up next on Locked On Baylor after this word from LinkedIn. LinkedIn Talent Solutions. We thought that both of these coaches would need LinkedIn before the season, but that has not been the case. It ain't like any other job board. It helps you hire professionals you can't find anywhere else, even those who aren't actively searching for a new job, but might be open to the perfect role. In a given month, over 70% of LinkedIn users don't visit any other job site. So if you're not looking there, you're not looking in the right spot. They know that small businesses are wearing so many hats, might not have the time or resources to hire. That's why they're making this process easier. And it's why 2.5 million small businesses use LinkedIn for hiring. So post your job for free at linkedin.com/lockedoncollege. It's linkedin.com/lockedoncollege to post your job for free. Terms and conditions do apply. Jim Croce said something about like time in a bottle. I don't know. It's not my favorite Jim Croce song, but I am a big fan of his. So let's get time in a bottle here. Now that Baylor has won 3 games in a row and is above 500 and is doing better than any of us thought when they were sitting there at 2-4, that could they go back and replay some of these games? Because the first part of that schedule was brutal, right? Especially looking back on it in hindsight. Utah, which was not a conference game. Would you like another crack at them? I sure hope so. Yeah, even in Salt Lake, Baylor might walk away with that game. They really might. BYU, they had a tough time because that's charged up. That's a rivalry game. Utah doesn't care anything about Baylor. I know they're probably mad at us because they think that we went out and tried to ruin Cam Rising's career, but doubtful. I mean, come on. Yeah, Baylor would do pretty well there. And Utah still got a strong defense. BYU, is that one you'd like to have back? Because Baylor, if they had a couple more minutes, they might have won that game, but you didn't. It's a 60-minute game. And you didn't play well enough for the first 15 or 30 to win that game. But the way Baylor's offense is clicking now, and that's when it really kind of started to click a little bit in that game. Yeah, I'd love another crack at BYU, especially at home. I'd love that opportunity to knock off such a good team. And in that BYU game, they were coming off, obviously, a gut-wrenching loss. We all remember it. Late September, the place, Boulder, Colorado. And the Bears were that close. That close. If you're listening and not watching on YouTube, that was very close. It comes down to a Hail Mary. That isn't really a Hail Mary. And Colorado sends the game into overtime. They score. Baylor fumble. And a guy who's no longer on the team, and the game's over. Right? It's done. And it's one of the most crushing losses I've ever had as a Baylor fan. And I remember thinking in that game that if the Bears go to like 5 wins, which they're at right now, so they could finish with 5 wins, and you're just short of bowl eligibility, you're going to look back at this game because you're going to have lost to a team that's probably just as good as you. And I would be wrong. Colorado is a good team. And they have legit buzz for the college football playoff. And if they win this conference, they absolutely should be in. But right now, they look like the second best team. And I know what you're saying. Well, they lost to Kansas State, and Kansas State might be the second best team anyway. Sure, yeah. But high-end talent on Colorado has gotten them to this spot. And it's really BYU and them. And this is a team that could really win this Big 12 championship. I was wrong about Colorado. But Baylor's much better from that point. And they played a hell of a game, a dandy, a classic that first time. So should Baylor want another crack at him? Yeah, they should. Because again, this is the infancy of the Sawyer Robertson offense. And they talked about taking the top off and really taking some chances. And they took 1 or 2 early in the game, and that was it. They were pretty conservative in the second half of that game. They would not be that way this time because they know what they've got in Sawyer and that connection that he's got with his receivers. And more importantly, they probably would have run the ball a little bit more in the first half because they now have Bryson Washington. which they had a little bit of in that game. But Bryson Washington, Dawson Pendergrass, and a little bit of Richard Reese. That's your running back stable. They didn't know what it was at the time. They didn't know what they had with some of their receivers. They didn't know about the connection they would have with the quarterback. And now all of those things are there. And you are the same defensively that you were back then. Shedeur had a day. But you have that with a confident kicker and Isaiah Hankins, who could have iced that game last time. Yeah, if you're Baylor, you absolutely want another shot at them. But Cam, that was a close game already. Is there enough for you to say that this Baylor team would actually beat Colorado this time around? I don't know. Because Baylor's gotten better, sure. But so is Colorado. They've developed other receivers outside of Travis Hunter. Their defense is much better than it was in that September game, which I thought Baylor let them off the hook defensively because I thought they could have done more against them, but which I still stand by. But this Colorado defense is better. And obviously, as we knew back then, but have even more reinforcements on now, Shedeur is one of the best quarterbacks in college football. This would be the matchup of, I think, the two best quarterbacks in the Big 12. Sawyer Robertson, Shedeur Sanders. We knew about one of those guys coming into that game. We didn't know Sawyer was going to be this good. But yes, if those two face right now, that would be the two best quarterbacks in the conference. And Colorado has developed as a team more outside of those two guys, Shedeur and Travis. Colorado is a better team than Baylor. I don't know if it's by very much, which is going to sound weird for a team that's only lost 2 games versus a team that's lost 4 and one's in the rankings and one's not really close. But I think the way they stand right now, they're pretty evenly matched, which is what they were back in September. But one team really took off after that, and one team sputtered for a couple more weeks and then took off. So can I sit here and tell you that if they played tomorrow on a neutral field, that Baylor's absolutely going to walk the dog with them? No, I wish. But I think Colorado is pretty good, and I was wrong about it. That said, if you're saying you got to put it pen to paper, who's going to win in the rematch? I think Baylor does it. I think Baylor's got more confidence offensively, and they take more shots, and they put that game to bed a little bit earlier than they did because they let Colorado hang around. It's still going to be a whale of a time to contain Shedeur Sanders, but for like 2 quarters, they did it better than almost anyone has all season, which I know is horseshoes and hand grenades, right? It doesn't count because they still gave up 38 and lost the game. But I would really like Baylor's chances in a rematch. I really would. And I think both those things can be true, that I think Colorado's probably a better team, but that I like Baylor's chances in a rematch of this. Let me know what you guys think. Please get involved down in the comments below. Let me know who you would think would win in a rematch in Baylor, Colorado. And would it be the matchup of the 2 best quarterbacks in the conference? I think so. I really think so. Anyway, let's talk a little hoops and what Baylor can do to become like a true blue blood of college basketball, because they're closer to it than you think. That's coming up next on Locked On Baylor. First, Robinhood, okay? It's time to get serious, guys, with Robinhood Gold. As you know, you don't need a silver spoon to eat up the financial favors of the 1%. Robinhood Gold allows others to get the rates and perks usually reserved for the high society. Well, now, the resourceful individual with Robinhood Gold can earn the very liberal rate of 4.5% APY on uninvested cash and be rewarded with a handsome 3% retirement boost on an IRA account. Robinhood Gold provides the privileges of a high net worth for any net worth. These generous benefits are now available for only $5 a month. The new gold standard is here with Robinhood Gold. Sign up at robinhood.com/gold. Terms to apply. For specific disclosures, visit robinhood.com/gold. Investing involves risks. Rate may change. Gold membership is offered by Robinhood Gold, LLC. Today's episode is also brought to you by FanDuel, our pals over there at America's #1 sportsbook. Right now, new customers can bet $5 and get $150 in bonus bets if you win. The FanDuel Sportsbook app gives you everything you need to place live bets on the NFL all in one place. So when you get a hunch in the middle of the game, you can check out the latest stats, you can view live play-by-play, and so much more on the same page where you place your bets. Just visit FanDuel.com to join today. Again, get started with $150 in bonus bets if you win that first $5 bet. That's FanDuel.com. Never waste a hunch and make every moment more with FanDuel, the official sportsbook partner of the National Football League. Basketball, it's good at Baylor. A new blood. Not a blue blood, but a new blood. And there are some people out there watching this right now or listening to this that are arguing, Cam, they're already a blue blood. Look at what they've done the last 5 years. Why can't they be a blue blood and Indiana is? And I get that to some extent. But what Baylor's never going to have is, I would say success in the black and white TV reels, right? You're not going to look back at championship banners from the 70s and 80s and 60s, and most of us don't really care about that. Because again, I'll use that example. Indiana's got 5 national championships. That's awesome. One of the all-time great programs. What has it done for them lately? UCLA, 1 Final Four in 20 years. What do all those national championship banners do for them now? Who cares that Lou Alcindor and Bill Walton played there 50, 60 years ago, right? I get that. And then there's the other programs like Kansas. They've always been winning. The guy with the lowest win percentage in Kansas all time is the guy who invented the sport. And they're still good. And Duke and North Carolina, they're still good, even with that history. But then there's these new bloods. And I'll even include teams like Villanova, who have a national championship in the 80s, right? That's a new blood. Gonzaga, a new blood without a national championship, but a new blood nonetheless. And then there's Baylor. And I had this thought after the Baylor game on Tuesday night against Sam Houston. And I said it on the post game a little bit, but it feels like Baylor is really, really close to breaking the dam. And by that, I mean becoming one of like the brands in college basketball. They've won the national championship. They can never take that from us. And that puts Baylor above most programs in college basketball. So don't jump me. But I'm talking about college basketball fan destination, Baylor. The way that it is for Duke and Indiana and North Carolina and UConn, that's what it's like for those schools. Kansas and Kentucky, all of them. They're probably not going to get to 9 national championships like Kentucky has, and they'll never have the 100 years of history probably, except for like 95 years from now. But they can really put themselves with the top programs in college basketball. They're very close to it. Because on Tuesday night, what I saw was a Hall of Fame coach, okay, an incredible roster full of guys who are great college basketball players and great pro prospects like they have every year now, and a student body, a student population that has bought into this thing. Because when I was at Baylor, and for many of you listening, when we were at Baylor, the team was still pretty good, but it was not like going to a Final Four felt like a step too far, and was evidenced by, a gut-wrenching loss in the Elite Eight in 2010 and another, overwhelming, overmatched loss in the Elite Eight to Cal's Kentucky team in 2012, right? But even then, it just felt like Baylor's not a team that goes to the Final Four. That's for Kansas. That's for Kentucky. It's not for Baylor. It's for Michigan State and Butler and Duke and UConn, but it's not for us. And so it was a joke saying, oh, we're a basketball school. When things weren't going well in football, oh, don't worry, we're a basketball school. That was the joke, right? Because Baylor was always going to be solid, but wasn't going to be that. And they have done that. They've won the national championship, and they have a chance to be that consistently because they have those pieces. The one thing they're lacking to really become that true college basketball blue blood destination place is the non-student fan base. Because I went there Tuesday night, a game against Sam Houston State, and the place they were in there over an hour before tip-off. That's what happens at Cameron Indoor and Fog Allen. The students punch out their place. They sold it out in minutes, like 3 minutes, and get there an hour plus early and are there for the whole game and make it an awesome environment. So again, to recap, you have that, you have the Hall of Fame coach, you have these great players, and you have an awesome arena. The only thing that's missing are those fans and the alumni punching that place out every single night. And I'm not talking about just the conference games. I'm not talking just about when Houston and Kansas come into town. I'm talking about every night. Baylor has that opportunity. They are good enough for that. We just need everyone on board. And we all see it. It's okay to say this. It's okay to call out your fellow brothers and sisters of Baylor alumni. It's not a good enough overall support for basketball for such a good team. And I know it's a football state, but give me a break. Come on. We're that good. I see it in the crowds. I see it on the viewership of these videos. Most people think I suck. That's okay. But I see great viewership for football videos, not for basketball. And that's not me trying to bitch here. I'm just saying that if that gets better, that's how Baylor's going to get there. They can become a national interest the way that Duke did, the way that Villanova did, the way that Gonzaga did. Baylor has all the tools at its disposal to be Duke. And that's a lofty goal, but lofty goals are the ones worth going for, okay? It wasn't instant success for Mike Krzyzewski. 4 years in, they wanted to fire him. When my dad was at Duke in 84, they lost to Wagner, okay? This was not like the building blocks of it, and it took a while for Scott Drew, too. It took Krzyzewski his 12th season. They won their first national championship. And for Scott Drew, it took a little bit longer in a weird situation. That was year 18 that he got there. Krzyzewski did not have the job that Scott Drew had to do. And Duke went from a school, an elite academic school with good basketball that had been to a couple of Final Fours, into the college basketball program in America the last 35 years. The one. And they developed a fan base nationally with a bunch of people that could never get into Duke. You know, it happened like that. That sounds organically the way that Baylor does. Baylor has that opportunity. They've proven they can win a national championship in basketball. I love Baylor, and so do you. And we've seen some really great football teams. The odds are more stacked against Baylor football to win a national championship than it is for Baylor basketball. Okay? They are very close. And by that, I mean getting the rest of the alums to buy in and get excited for basketball and treat every basketball game the way it should be. And maybe another Final Four national championship. We are that close to pitching the tents in Drewville outside the Foster Pavilion. Duke is the program of record in the last 40 years in college basketball. But it wasn't always that way. And in terms of what you look at with that school, it's small, it's private, it originally had a church affiliation, and it's in a place with a rich sports culture. That sounds an awful lot like Baylor to me. It's in Durham, not Charlotte, not Raleigh. Baylor's in Waco, not Austin, not Dallas, not Houston. There's a ton of similarities here. They had a coach who was there for 40 plus years. Baylor's going to have that same thing. They're not great at football. Baylor's not great at football for a long time. There's more similarities there than you think. Can Baylor become Duke? It's not nuts. UConn, same way. UConn was just another mid-sized state school in the Northeast that wasn't good at anything until Jim Calhoun got there in the 90s. And now they're a true blue blood. They have more national championships than Duke. In the last 25 years, all of them. It's a goal worth shooting for. And people will laugh at this. They'll poke fun at this. And it's going to take a couple of years before I can look back on this and say, hey, we got close to that. And it's going to be 20 years before you can actually compare it to what Duke did. But Baylor can be Duke if we're all invested in it. Don't forget that. And hopefully the Bears take out West Virginia tomorrow. Let me know what you think about the Bears' chances in Morgantown, what you think this basketball program can become. Tell me I'm nuts if I'm nuts, but someone who's named after Cameron Indoor Stadium would really like Baylor to have that kind of tradition. And I think it's closer than you think. Let me know down in the comments below. Be sure to like and subscribe. Ring that notification bell to get notified every time we're dropping a video on YouTube or wherever you get your podcasts. We will see you tomorrow evening in the #1 destination for Baylor football postgame after the Bears take out the West Virginia Mountaineers. It's going to be live here on YouTube. We will see you then on Locked On Baylor.